Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
State Representative Don Vruwink of Milton is a Democrat seeking re-election in the 43rd Assembly District. Don, welcome back to WisconsinEye.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to see you again.
My traditional question for incumbents: if you're re-elected, your top priority in the next session? Go.
Well, my top priority is to deal with this COVID pandemic because I think it's affecting everything that we do. So that's got to be our priority, to find a way out of this pandemic as fast as we can, because it's affecting every aspect of our life.
Then you support the governor's extension of the mask edict, which will be before a judge next Monday, correct?
Well, if you look, the public schools who are in session, make all their people wear masks. And I think we've had the best results from our public schools, who are creating a path forward by mandating masks of all their students and the teachers and everyone else. I mean, I look at, when I go around the state, I've spoken at some conferences, and I've been in La Crosse last week, and I spoke, and in 50 people, there were 5 people with masks, even though we were inside. So even though we have the mask edict, we're not following it, and that's why the cases are spiking.
We're seeing a record number of hospitalizations and, quite frankly, people in intensive care with COVID-19. If you're reelected and voting on the next state budget, do hospitals deserve an even greater priority than they may have in the current one?
Absolutely, they deserve a greater priority. When we were closed down, they were losing $250 million every week, and people were delaying standard procedures. In fact, I have a procedure I need to do, and they've asked me if I could wait till COVID was over because they're overwhelmed. And as long as I can handle not having to go, I'm delaying as long as I can to help the hospitals out.
Okay. The bill by Senator Kappinga and Representative Bourne says charities, businesses, organizations, if they follow COVID-19 protocols, they could not be sued over COVID-19. Is that a bill you could vote for?
If I can see the details, yeah, it's certainly a bill that I can vote for. But I know that, what protocols are we going to follow? Are we going to follow Wisconsin protocols? Are we going to follow federal protocols? Those things seem to keep changing all the time. So I think we have to, in a bill, if we can establish what the protocols are, I think it's something that we need to do, but we have to agree on what protocols that have to be followed.
Well, you're a veteran legislator. Let me ask you a budget question. If the pandemic means we don't collect, I'm going to make up a number, $1 billion in state tax collections, how would you make up that shortfall? Would you cut spending, or would you consider raising taxes or fees, or reworking a tax code?
Well, I think, first of all, in this pandemic, because there's a lot of people hurting, we have to look at every place we can cut and still provide the essential services that we need. So I think cutting spending is where we start first and see what we need. But there are some places we can't cut. I look at, like for dentists, for example, they only get 1% of the health budget. And, in our hospitals take Medicaid patients and we don't reimburse them enough. So we need, we can't cut spending that we can't treat the people who are in need. So, but spending has to come first. Then I would look at any fees or tax increases after that. But certainly we have to tackle the spending first.
Well, as a Democrat, do you support the governor's People's Maps Commission proposal to draw the next congressional and legislative district lines, then forward it to the legislature to be enacted?
Yeah, I fully support that, because if you've seen the surveys in the last 4 years, we've seen, I think 83% of Democrats support fair maps by a maps commission. I think 63% of Republicans, 70% of independents. I think 51 counties have passed resolutions. People want fair maps. People want to be represented by the best candidate, not because a map is drawn to advantage one party or another. And I actually introduced that legislation 4 years ago, and I had Representative Novak sign on to it from the Republican Party. In this last session, we had 5 Republicans sign on to it. So I think there's a fairly number of people that want to see the FAIR maps implemented, and we should, because it would save us money. I mean, and the fights that we've had over maps, I mean, how many millions of dollars have we spent that we could use now, especially in this next budget, that we could use to give back to people in the state of Wisconsin rather than fight over the maps, would be a blessing. And I think, I mean, it's the state legislator's duty to make the maps, but we can, if we can all agree to accept the maps from a nonpartisan maps commission, then I think we're making progress. And other states have done it, and they've used it, and it has worked successfully for them.
New subject. We watched the debate over policing reform play out nationally and even in Kenosha. The speaker is going to form a task force. Senator Van Wanggaard has a few bills. The governor's got 9 bills. He wanted a special session. The police association has bills. The Black Caucus has bills. My question, what specific policing reforms do you think should be enacted into law?
Well, I'm one, I mean, when we look at reform, it's always good to reform when problems come up. And I am not going to commit to any reforms yet until I get an opportunity to talk to my police chiefs, police officers, and so forth. I have 15 former students who I taught in Milton High School who are police officers. I want to hear from them because I trust them, because I know them, I know their families, I know what kind of police officers they are. So before I commit to anything, I want to hear from them because they're in the field every day. And once I hear from them, then I can commit to which way we need to move forward. There's no doubt in my mind we need to make reforms, and I think police officers will tell you some reforms need to be made, but I want to hear from the people who actually live it every day.
Don, as more states, including neighboring Illinois, legalize medical and recreational marijuana, what's your position?
I think medical marijuana certainly is something we have to look at. I know people who use it and tell me it's effective for them for relieving their glaucoma and such. And they tell me they use it before they go to bed so that they're not affecting, their driving or anything like that. I think if we look at it from that respect, I think it's certainly something we should move forward with. I still would like to see, before we talk about legalizing marijuana, I would like to see, what are we talking about? 10% THC, 1% THC? Are we talking about using it in vaping? Statistics show that can be very dangerous to the health of young people. So it's hard to commit to legalize marijuana until I know exactly what we're talking about. What's going to be the potency of marijuana? The debate over Wisconsin's high property taxes that's the reason that school districts and local governments have lived with caps and limits on their property tax levies for more than 20 years. If you're voting on the next state budget, should those caps and limits on property tax levies to hold down property taxes on homes stay in place? Well, Steve, I served on the Milton City Council for 4 years. I was council president. I served on the local school board. And so we were affected by these caps. And and right now it's hurting a lot of school districts because they have to go to referendum just to keep their doors open and to meet their needs. So knowing what I've known from my experience, I believe local officials are, when you see people out in your community every day, local officials are more conservative than probably officials at the state level. And they know their needs best. And I think we hamstring them by keeping limits on. I mean, if we wanted to keep limits on, at least we should index it to inflation. But we seem to restrict them as much as we can. When I sat on the education committee and I listened to 16 school districts tell me they can't cut anymore. It's impossible for them to cut. And if they can't pass a referendum, what's their next step? If you look at how we dissolve school districts, if nobody wants to annex them, and we had this argument with Palmyra Eagle of dissolving that district, school districts lose in a dissolution if they're forced to take something. So we need to change the system. I know, for example, my neighboring city, Janesville here, when the caps were put in place, they had been very fiscally conservative. And they don't get the same amount of revenue from shared revenue that other cities their size do, because they had restricted their spending before we put these caps in place. And it doesn't seem to be a fair process right now. And even when we allow them to go to referendum to exceed their spending, then they lose state aid. And that doesn't make sense. So we have to find a better way. So I would be willing to look at eliminating these caps, because I believe local officials will be more conservative with taxpayers' money than we are at the state level, and they can tailor their needs.
As a former council member, then let me ask you this: is it time to consider alternative revenue sources for cities, villages, and towns? I guess I'm referring to the bill by Representative Goyke. If Milwaukee residents passed a referendum, Milwaukee could levy a 0.5-cent sales tax. Do local governments need options like that?
I believe the time has come that we do. Other states allow that to happen. And I think the time has come for the state to consider that, because it's the local taxpayers deciding for themselves if they want to tax themselves, if they see a need for a new public library or a new city hall or something of that nature. So I think we should allow them to make that decision and not hamstring the cities by these caps.
Last year, as you know, the governor wanted to raise the gas tax. Our gas tax is 30.9 cents per gallon, hasn't been raised in 10 or 12 years. Are you willing to reconsider the raising the gas tax?
Well, I always supported raising the gas tax, and I think as a body, the assembly was willing to raise the gas tax. I mean, we haven't raised the federal tax or the state tax for a period of time, and certainly things aren't getting cheaper, and the few standards are causing us to collect less. I mean, my personal opinion is that we need to look at the way we finance roads, bridges, and anything in the 21st century. We're still in a 20th century approach when we're in the 21st century. I believe that we need to look at public-private partnerships and take the decision-making out of the hands of lawmakers and put it in the hands of sometimes private entities who will help build these roads based upon need. And then I think we need to look at maybe sending people a monthly bill for their driving, just like we do with utility bills. I mean, other states have done this, other countries have done this, and I think we need a whole new approach to how we look at how we fund our roads and how we decide what roads get built. Because now, you know, if a section has a political power and they can lobby, we might build roads in places that really aren't needed. And if we did it, if we look at we're always talking about let the private market dictate. Maybe we need to go back to that approach that the marketplace dictates where we build the roads, and not how politicians and who are more powerful get the opportunity to get the roads in their districts.
When you talk about a whole new approach, I don't hear you talk about tolling. Not a fan of tolling?
Well, when we talk about tolling, I think the traditional sense of tolling, no. I mean, we don't want those lines where you have to throw money in. But I think we have the technology to put, things under the hood of the cars to register how many miles that a car goes, and we base this upon that, And I just was at a conference with milk haulers, and listening to the trucking association, how many companies have went under. I mean, I don't think we can ask the truckers to pay more. I think we, as a state, we need to. I mean, they provide a vital service to our economy. I think everybody has to pay their fair share, but if they pay less, then consumers pay less for their goods. So I think I would be in favor of a whole new approach, a 21st century approach, rather than just say the gas tax. I know in our last budget, I've been hearing from used car dealers and salvage car dealers, we raised the price of
titles.
Our titles, yeah.
Titling almost doubled.
I've had salvage companies tell me they're losing $15,000 to $20,000 a year because we targeted them. Why them? Why do they have to pay more? Because they buy cars from other states, they have to buy up the title, then they have to buy a new title when they sell it. So they're getting double tax. Is that really fair to them? They have to do that? So I'm all about fairness for people, that we all need to pay our fair share because roads and infrastructure are vital to our economy. And Wisconsin was ranked, I think we're given a C for our overall infrastructure. So we need to do something quickly because infrastructure is important where businesses want to locate.
Again, drawing on your experience as a local elected official, if a school board or a local government plans a major public works project, should they have to give a preference to a Wisconsin businesses?
Well, I think you should always give preference to Wisconsin businesses. But to say that, I mean, we border 3 states. I mean, you have businesses down in Beloit that are interstate businesses. So, they might have workers from both sides, from Illinois and from Wisconsin. So I think we can be a little more lenient on companies that sit on the border. But I do think we owe it to our Wisconsin companies and Wisconsin workers that we give them a look first, because they're the ones that give it back to our economy.
Last question, differences between you and your opponent on November 3?
Well, we've only had one debate, so I don't know the greatest amount of differences. I didn't see too much differences when we debated each other. The biggest difference is that she would not commit to fair maps. So I think the biggest difference is the fact that I would like to see Wisconsin implement a fair maps where we take the legislators out of it. We have to vote for it, but we owe it to the people of Wisconsin to have a commission that gives us a proposal, and we vote upon that proposal.
Thank you. State Representative Don Vruwink, of Milton, is a Democrat seeking re-election in the 43rd Assembly District. Don, sorry to mangle your name, but thank you so much for talking to WisconsinEye.
All right. Thank you, Steve, and stay safe.
You too. Take care. Thank you.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.